I'm Rob Lucuria at Awards Heaven, and I'm really excited today to be talking with the amazing sound team of Pillion, a darkly funny, intimate queer romance about a shy guy drawn into a transformative dom-sub relationship with a charismatic biker. You know, just your regular good old-fashioned Sunday afternoon film. It's the feature debut of writer-director Harry Lighton, starring Harry Mellon and Alexander Skarsgård. We have sound designer, re-recording, mixer, and supervising sound editor Gunnar Óskarsson. We have production sound mixer Adam Fletcher, and re-recording mixer and supervising sound editor Christopher Wilson. Okay, let's talk about this film because this is a film where sound isn't just texture, it's desire, it's atmosphere, and it's really driving the storytelling. So let's dive in. So when you first read the script, guys, and I'm going to go to you first, Gunnar, and you spoke with director Harry Lighton, what did you understand as sound's role in this film? In other words, what were the key elements that you knew the team had to get right from the outset to make the whole thing land?
So what we had to get right on this film with the sound was we had to, number one, base everything that we did in what we called reality. So we didn't want to go too fantastical with anything, although because this was such an unusual subject matter, we didn't want to guide people too hard in any direction, tell them what to think or tell them how to feel about it. But we did, want the sound world to be big and rich, exciting, and sort of support Colin's journey through the film. So, I think that would be the guiding principle that we had. And we didn't, and without ever losing our sense of reality, like this was really happening.
Yeah, very much. Harry was insistent that it had to be realistic as the forefront. So the characters are in a real world. So for Colin, we have to establish what his real world is, but then equally we have to move into something that we are with the sound trying to get the audience to feel the same emotions that he does. So their sense of desire, sense of thrill that comes out through, the big motorbikes and, other bits of tension where he's feeling that. That's something that sound had to play a part where the audience feels it emotionally, the same way that Colin is, but we're not trying to use sound to sensationalize elements of the story because it's his sort of normal life. So it was a very tricky brief, but one we always just listen to what the director wants and realize their vision and take the audience through manipulating them, but without them really being aware of it. They just go on this journey that the characters do.
Absolutely. So when we were between objective and sound and subjective in the sound design, we had to make those transitions quite slow and deliberate. So you start off very normal maybe, and then you end up in a very fantastical place, but you don't necessarily notice the journey happening. That was one of the tricks that we, if you want to call it a trick, that we used.
And it also meant with the production audio, we had to be quite authentic with it, and record things for real there and then, try and avoid as much ADR as possible. It's obviously tricky in certain scenarios, but we like the stuff with the barbershop quartet, we recorded all of that live, which was very fun, and to build that world around in those scenarios, and to give these the tools to give it an authentic feel. So that was important too.
Yeah.
And to underline that importance, we also on the post-production side went to pubs in the area where the film was filmed, recorded sort of chatter and stuff like that to get the real how do you say, the accents of what people are saying, what they're talking about, to put in the film, rather than using or relying too much on a loop group or actors you know, a lot of the background vocals were actually real people from that area.
Wow. You know, Harry obviously wanted one foot in realism. Like you want the film to be real because you want to go along with how fantastical this relationship is, and you want to believe it, right? And I think that's really key to why this film is so successful. But the sound to me, as a layperson, still felt really heightened and tactile. Like, and I can't really actually quite pinpoint why it's so tactile. But for example, the bikes, the zip, the leather, the movement of their two bodies, particularly in the laneway, the quartet. There's so many examples where the sound becomes really physical because you feel it rather than hear it. And maybe I'm just making complete nonsense, but I think I'm onto something. I'm just wondering, Chris, what would you say to that? What was the brief in trying to make the soundscape on this film tactile?
Well, you're not missing anything. That it's been something that we worked very hard to achieve, and working with Harry's with his direction is in intentions. You know, he's cut the film how he wanted the film. We have to then really push those elements and the way he wants to tell that story. So with the sound, the key to that, the sensations that the audience are feeling, is because it's warranted. It's coming from the character, from what they experience. We're not sort of heightening sound for an effect or just to do it arbitrarily. We're doing it because that's what they're feeling. So yes, when the moment comes, let's say everything is quite real, but we are slowly building to these moments of sort of real emotional and sort of plot driven high points that allows us with sound to give the audience that feeling, being really close to zips or leather movement, those things that are key moments in the film, we're allowed to then make those even more real. And the same as I say with the motorbikes, Gunnar's work on the motorbikes to make those give you such power and a real attraction. That's something that you build to. We weren't doing that just to the sake of, oh, well, there's a bike, so we've got to make that big. It's when does that need to really resonate with the audience and draw them through the story? That's what we were going for.
Absolutely. What does it feel like to sit on a motorbike? What are you hearing when you're sitting on a motorbike? What does it feel like when you're you know, in an alleyway, having illicit sex? It's you're guiding what you're hearing and what you're feeling, excluding some things, foregrounding other things, and that was a continual sort of decision making, sort of second by second, how we were doing that.
Yeah, and I think that because the sound feels so grounded and yet so tactile, it makes those moments ever more like not shocking, but like exhilarating or taboo or whatever the film's going for. The sound is really critical, and so that begs this question, Adam. On the production side, for example, I can imagine that bikes and working with motorbikes brings wind, like distance, helmets, vibration, sudden dynamic swings. Like I don't know how you did it, but can you talk us through keeping dialogue usable while still preserving that really raw, interesting, compelling engine presence in the soundscape?
Well, we didn't really get the opportunity to record much of the motorbikes there and then. It's a very modest budget, so we had a short schedule to shoot everything. And so, you know, in an ideal world, we'd have the bikes there and we'd have a day session doing some recordings that we can hand over, or you guys in post would also have that opportunity, but we didn't. So Chris and Gunnar can talk more about the bike recordings because I didn't really play a massive part in that. But with the dialogue and the performances that the actors were doing, it was very important to try and record those authentically and get clean, good dialogue. And with a leather jacket, chains around the neck, your initial thoughts are, wow, how are we going to do this? But everyone was so collaborative, costume especially, and we were able to put mics in places that actually sounded great. Like Ray's motorbike jacket had this perfect sort of flap that went over exactly where you want a mic to go to record dialogue very clean. And it was away from anything else, and it didn't move at all because they're so rigid, these biker outfits are. And we had to sew a mic pack in sort of like a lump. It was like a safety lump in the back of these jackets to, dampen the falls. We had to like put a transmitter in there so it wasn't too uncomfortable for Alex. And we worked together on that and got my second AS Warris managed to get that in a really good place, and it sounded really great. And that's just one example of like a tricky costume that you might expect to actually sounding really good. And then obviously we're trying to get booms over everything at every point. The camera movements are very dynamic in Pillion. We didn't do your traditional let's just shoot a mid close up wide. The camera movements are very development shots and very well thought out, and so and realistic, I guess. And so we work together to make sure that we're following everything and capturing all those moments as it was happening. So yeah, and my boom operator Alex, he had to do some crazy maneuvers to keep things on mic, and yeah, he did a fantastic job doing that. I'm trying to think of another scenario. It was so the barbershop quartet. The costumes they're wearing are very sort of starchy costumes, quite noisy. So we had to spend a bit of time in the morning of the first day. We shot some of those, trying to get them mics in a position that weren't compromising too much clarity for close Russell. But it was important we recorded those live. We had earpieces on standby and pre-recordings on standby, but I'm so proud that we never needed to actually use them. And we recorded those in the spaces, and we got to get clever with sort of plant mics and stuff as well to make sure we was giving Chris the air that they need to mix in with the radio mics to make it sound more authentic, because radio mics can often sound quite unnatural, and booms often sound very natural. So, but you need the combination of both to make some of these shots work. And so it's just about providing the options for Chris and Gunnar to work their magic, which they did fantastically.
Yeah. Actually, it goes to show the resourcefulness, particularly on a small budget independent film like this. And it also really underlines that the production sound mixer and the costume designer often have to get together and work out ways to make this work. And it's so fascinating that most audiences would never occur to us that is actually, there's a mic hidden here and a mic hidden there. But it's fascinating to me that you're able to do that. And it goes to show that maybe you don't need to have millions and millions of dollars in budget to capture such really beautiful, crisp sound that you've done. So then moving on then to what Gunnar and Chris are doing, I was thinking, Chris, in the final mix, when Adam's done his job and he's handed over, what wins the battle for space? Like, is it always, for you, in your opinion, is it always going to be dialogue, or do you sometimes prioritize like the surrounding environment too, because it's also part of the storytelling?
Well, just to pick up on what you were saying before, is that yes, you don't need humongous budgets in order to get great results. The important thing is being able to have good conversations and good planning. Good, if post sound can be on board at the same time as location sound contracted, so ideally even at script stage, then all the departments can be having this conversation about, well, where do we need to focus on, what are going to be complicated scenes, what do we all want to achieve. So when you have less resources available, you can actually, if you're focused and it's organized well, then you can capture so much, and that makes our job so much easier in post sound. And also it helps location sound, because they say, okay, well, we already know what the focus is, what we need to put forward. And it reinforces their authority on set as well, that they say, no, this is really important, that if we can plan it correctly, then we can get it right, and then you're not compromised. So the recordings that they make are everything that we need to tell the story going all the way through. So it's so important that the earlier on board a production, the better it is to achieve, make those creative ideas that the director wants, follow them through, and also we can be efficient economically as well, that we're all focused and you're making the best of the limited resources, if you have limited resources, to get it through. In terms of what you were asking about what is the focus when we get to post sound, well, everything's important. So ideally, as Adam said, on set, dialogue becomes a key thing that he needs to record, because that's the actor's performance. But actor's performance doesn't only relate to dialogue, it also relates to their movement and everything. We have scenes, for example, the wrestling scene, they're not talking. So much there's movement in there, their breath, how they're doing, and how their feet sound in that space. So ideally, if he's given the right amount of time to prep in a room, then we're getting authentic things to use, which goes back to what Harry wanted in the first place, is realism. So if we can capture and use as much of that real sound for those environments, leather moves and stuff, if not in where the dialogue, then that all builds into something that is a unique whole, and we'll use everything we can. In terms of how we mixed dialogue against other stuff, that really just, with all of us talking together, Gunnar, Harry, myself, working with the music, you just go, it's how do we create this journey? And it was just work over time to realize, what is the focus? What needs to lead and beckon the audience through these scenes to take them on the journey?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And in fact, as an aside, I've always wondered if you ever, and this is more a question for Gunnar and Chris, but Adam, you probably have some insight. What happens when the production sound mixer isn't able, or either not because of incompetence, which is because of the elements or budget or whatever it may be, isn't able to get the authentic sounds required? Does that mean that the film just has to completely rely on ADR, Foley, and all the other things that you would be doing in the mixing in post? Is that really just it? And I wonder, does it happen often?
We do have a good example of this on this film. The alleyway scene is very important at the beginning of the scene. The location for that was extremely noisy. We recorded it in the daytime and it was fine, but at nighttime, this fan came on that was above the whole action, and we couldn't turn it off. We couldn't do anything about it. And for me, that was my worst day on set, personally.
What a nightmare.
I was pulling my hair out. I was like, I think this is a write-off. I think we're going to have to ADR all of it. We used our best judgment, because we couldn't have a radio mic on Alex because his costume wouldn't allow it, because of what the action was happening. So we had to rely on booms, which pick up a lot more of the background noise as well. And so there was just it was a very tricky situation for me, where I felt defeated and thought that it was going to have to be ADR'd. And by some miracle, and I'm sure they will elaborate on this, Chris managed to transform it and preserve quite a lot of it, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was the first scene that we were asked to look at, in fact, whilst there was still picture editing, was to look at that scene and make sure that it was actually viable and what we could do with it. So we had a first look at it, and we were able to establish that we didn't need really to ADR any of the lines. We could actually maintain that performance with a lot of work to dampen the sounds and the sounds that you don't want, that come from fans and these kind of things, and keep it to the performance that the actors give. Now that was the important thing, and Adam did really well. And so it shows that even if you have a costume can't do it, but if he's got, say, 2 boom ops, then he's got 2 sources where he can record things. So the material that we have, more material we have and sources to choose from, the easier it is to solve the puzzle, as it were, when you've got noisy things. Even with complicated location recordings, we managed to not have to use the ADR over a whole scene. We were just where we have used ADR, it's just picking up lines mostly, and that's perhaps more for a different performance take that Harry wanted rather than compromised location stuff. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Gunnar?
Yeah, it's the same for me on the effects side. Was kind of like with the bike that I wanted to use as much of the bike sound. So Alexander's bike in the film is a BMW. What is it? An X5 racing bike, a very specific sound. And I really wanted to use as much of that as possible because Adam was recording it in the place in the places where it's recorded. It would be very hard, and it was very hard for me to use any library sounds to cover it because of where it was recorded, the acoustics of it, the point of hearing. It just becomes very, and the way people drive bikes, it can be it's such a and it has all these other sounds to it than just the engine, the rattling of the plastic and all of those things, and the suspension and all of those. So I that was actually I was able to use a lot of it, and then it was kind of a puzzle because when I wasn't able to use it, the bike maybe disappeared. I augmented it with some library sounds, but then also, you wanted to make it extra and extra special, so that was it was treated with a bunch of different how do you say, like plugins, outboard gear, that type of thing, to make it sort of shine more and be nice and full, let's say.
Yeah.
And pushed, and I think that was it was a really fun part of the exercise. Sometimes there was it got a bit heavy, the editing, because actors were talking, directors were talking over some of the scenes, and then you had to I had to whip things from other scenes. But I think in general, it flowed pretty nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. In my chat with composer Oliver Coates, he talks about how the score, he uses a lot of restraint in his score, and he built like motorbike purring textures into the score at low levels early on. And it occurred to me then, how do you coordinate with the music so the line between score, design, and atmosphere felt seamless rather than competitive? Because in this film, it really does feel quite seamless. And half the time, I don't even know whether I'm listening to score or just a soundscape. It does feel really cohesive. So how did you, I should say, collaborate with Oliver on this particular film? I'll go to you first, Gunnar.
So I took his cue and I heard what he was doing, and I basically we bridged the sound of the bikes to the music, and that was done with pitch. So I was using samplers to sample the sound of the bikes, tuning them to the music or where it would end, and then I would make soundscape in sort of granular synthesizers of the bikes, making sort of musical sounds out of the bikes in the same pitch that would reach the same pitch as the music. So there was kind of like a handover, a gray space between the sound and the music, and it was
Wow.
and there was a lot of fun doing that, and I love that Oliver had this idea that because that made it easy for me to do those kind of things. Sometimes if I'm working on a film with a composer maybe necessarily doesn't think about stuff like that, it can be done. But Oliver certainly made it easy to do that in this one.
Anything to add to that, Chris?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that, he's blending it through, and then we're also on the mix stage making choices about how that handover also happens in terms of where we're hearing those sounds go and come from. So in terms of, let's say, dialogue or essences that then strip away, and you launch through into the music. I mean, it's wonderful. Our job is really to let the music sort of shine, and in those transition moments is how can we go through where that becomes seamless, you know, in this film. How does that run where the audience are just taken on that journey? So we'll always try and do everything we can in terms of sound team to let that music play as the composer intended. You know, we don't really ever want to get in the way or do anything that's causing a battle. You tend to just try to lead and understand what is they're doing and work sympathetically with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, before I let you guys go, I would just love, we've heard of a couple of your highlights, and Adam, you were very generous to give us, you know, a time where it almost broke you, but you were able to find a way through. I always find that so fascinating. But if you could pinpoint something that you guys haven't raised yet that you're really, really proud of from a pure sound storytelling standpoint, what would you say is a sequence or a scene that you will look back on and think, yeah, I was really cooking that day and I'm very proud of it? I'll go to you first, Adam.
For me, it's the barbershop quartet stuff. It's such a privilege to be able to record those kind of performances live and it work well. I come from a music background originally as well, so it's sort of it came into that. The actors had rehearsed so brilliantly and sang so brilliantly, and for me, that was just magic to record and magic to watch back on the screen, and that was my highlight for sure.
What about you, Chris?
I think for me, it's that barbershop and the whole sort of pub scene, because it flows and it just works. But there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. As Adam said, you know, so much work for him to record all the elements they want. So that what he's done is being able to give us the focus to move from character to character as they sing in the barbershop, but then also come back and be in the room. The recordings, as Gunnar said, there's additional authentic recordings of proper London pub at Christmas time come into it. Others of design, how we're putting across, how the background music, we recorded like a pub band, and we had that in, how that's treated in the space. It just, all those elements just work, but for the viewer, they're just going along. So we're getting the viewer to focus on what Harry wants them to go through. So it's from singer to singer to singer to the environment of the pub, all the information they're getting and the character and the environment that they feel. I think that whole sequence leading to that first time that Colin and Ray meet each other and how we can pull out and pull in and the focus that we've done, I think that was really successful.
And you, Gunnar?
If I had to choose one moment, it would probably be the opening of the film. Harry wanted that to start off as a quiet sort of soundscape where you don't know where you were necessarily, and then you would start to hear a sound that you couldn't place, which would be like a motorbike in the way distance, and then that motorbike would sort of come closer and closer and closer and closer and closer until we hit the title music. And I believe it's only like 45 seconds or something, and I think I spent the longest, I mean, for sure, I spent the longest per second on that scene of anything in the film, because I knew it was really, really important to Harry. Yeah, it was, and what made it really special was when I played it to him after I'd been working on it. He just sat down, I played it, he didn't say anything, and then he said, "Can you play that again?" And then I played it again, and he sort of leaned in and listened to it. He said, "There's no notes. That's just perfect. Thanks so much." And so, you know, when you get that from a director, I think I got that once on this film, and
Love it.
Then, you know, yeah, that was a really good moment for me.
That is so satisfying, and I must say, I loved the beginning as well. Like, as soon as the titles started, I was like, okay, I see what you guys are doing with this. This is going to be really fun, and it really was. Everybody, that's Gunnar Óskarsson, Adam Fletcher, and Christopher Wilson on Pillion, a masterclass in restraint, texture, and storytelling through sound. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today.
Thank you so much.